space and allowing each child to thrive. So, ready for the next slide? So if you're unfamiliar with CASTLE is the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning. And what they've done is provide a process and applications to social and emotional learning. So social and emotional learning is a process for children and adults, a lifelong process to learn to recognize and manage our emotions, to demonstrate empathy for ourselves and others, to establish positive relationships, and to make sound decisions for the benefit of ourselves and others. So one of the really key components to social and emotional learning is what it equips students and adults with the tools needed to handle really difficult life situations in a positive and productive manner. Next slide. And there are 5 main components to social and emotional learning. And so when you have a chance to go through this, there's a video link and there's a few links in there that you can follow up and learn some more. But I wanted to go over each of these 5 components so that we're aware of what they are and be able to recognize how they show up in like a learning space, for example. So there's self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making. Ready for the next slide? So when we talk about self-awareness, that really allows us to recognize our emotions and the impact it has on our behavior. For a child, what that may look like is being able to recognize when I am frustrated and provide a child with the opportunity and tools to work through that emotion of being frustrated in a learning space so that they can show up in a productive manner for themselves and others. So it's knowing our strengths and areas that need improvement. So for a child and for an adult, that translates to knowing what we already know well and knowing our weaknesses so that we can work to address them, and working on a lot of growth mindset and some really efficient ways to recognize how our emotions show up in different spaces. So if we learn more about ourselves, we know then how to handle our emotions. So as we're processing those emotions, here's what we can do to better meet our needs. And as an adult in the classroom or in any learning space, here's how we can recognize what frustration can look like for different children and how to help them to process that emotion before it becomes overwhelming for the child or for the adult. Next slide. So self-management teaches us to, okay, now we've just recognized our emotion. Now how can we regulate our emotion? So how can we best meet our needs without causing a disruption or without losing patience? So these are tools that would allow us to work through difficult times and still meet long-term goals for our academic success and for life goals. And so I think this is an important component to any learning environment for a child. And so as an adult, being able to recognize how that shows up in a classroom space is really useful. And so, you know, equipping your classroom with the right tools for students to do this sort of work is super important. So I love this self-management tool. I show, you know, self-management through cozy corners and just, you know, the more I establish a relationship with a child, the more I can recognize how they show their emotions. And then we work on communication, how to get the needs of each child met before it becomes a behavior, right? So next slide. And so social awareness is our ability to understand social norms and ethical norms. And this is really where cultural responsiveness comes into play. So our culture does dictate how we relate to others. And so the more we can see ourselves in other people's shoes and show different perspectives, we can then empathize with others. and we can learn to recognize how our strengths come together to build community. So within a space of a really diverse set of kids, it's important for them to recognize how to work with each other and respect cultural differences, because that does show up in how we relate to others. And so by doing that and celebrating these diversities and these, that it's okay to have these different ways of communicating, we learn to empathize with others and help get our needs met and their needs met as well. Next slide. And so when we talk about relationship skills, we're really equipping children and adults with the ability to relate to others, communicate in a way that is clear, and to practice active listening, to resolve conflicts in a respectful way, and to seek help from others when we cannot on our own communicate effectively or get our needs met, and also offering help to others. So the ability to say no to peer pressure is really important in a learning space, right? We want kids to feel like they can respect differences without using it as an opportunity to put each other down. So what I typically say to students in the classroom is, we've got to use our words to build each other up, then tear each other down. And I think it's just a simple way that translates from my kinders to my grade 8 students. And so it does seem to work where we can hold students accountable so that they're using words that help each other rather than tease each other, you know? Next slide. And so last of these core competencies is responsible decision making. So this is when we equip children with the ability to recognize what is okay based on societal norms and what they need to do to protect themselves and others. So considering safety and consequences for one's actions. So this is really important starting as young as kindergarten, but it gets especially important as we get older and we talk about grade 8 students and high school students. When I focus on the school to prison pipeline, this is where I come to. So on top of equipping children with the ability to recognize and practice emotional intelligence, it's really important to get them to recognize and think about the consequences to actions before the action is taken. Next slide. So I want to really come back to the importance of this work. So to me, this work is super important because when I tutor children or when parents come to me for tutoring, it's usually for a few reasons. There's something happening in the classroom that's led to an overwhelming situation and the parent needs help, right? The parent or caregiver needs help to address whether it's a specific goal in an IEP or 504 plan, or if it's a behavior that's manifested itself. And what I always come back to is these are communication breakdowns, right? These are children whose needs are not being met, and we need to equip them with the tools so that they can communicate effectively, recognize their emotions, and advocate for themselves and others. And so by doing that, what it does is it reduces that distress that students go into a learning space feeling. It helps prevent bullying and reduces absenteeism. So by equipping adults with these tools in the classroom and then having that translate to teaching children to recognize social and emotional learning, we see the change to academics and life. And so that's what I love most about social and emotional learning, that it really does somehow meet an academic need, but actually it's the whole child. So learning to recognize, I need time to process what I'm going through and communicate that. I need to be able to communicate effectively when someone is bullying me. Things like that really show up. And if we can all sort of work through the social and emotional learning lens, I think we provide a safe and supportive environment for children to learn and thrive. So I really love this work for so many reasons, but I think when I think about the whole child, this is what I come back to. Next slide. So I've been implementing social and emotional applications throughout my STEM Days program and throughout my tutoring program. And so the latest is a pen pal program. So a pen pal program is, I don't know if, you know, parents still use this or adults still use this, but what I remember from a pen pal program is it gives students the opportunity to relate to each other in a space where they can be more vulnerable. So I find that students can, express their emotions more in a written letter than they can speaking in a learning space. So there's a sign-up form that adults can use to send to parents to fill out if they want to participate. You can pair students based on grade level or interest. So for example, if you teach one grade level, you might want to focus on pairing by interest. Or if you teach multiple grade levels, you might want to break it up by grade level. So an additional part of just a pen pal program where we're allowing students to relate to each other is soliciting concerns that need peer support. So within that online or paper application to a pen pal program, you might want to ask, tell us more about what your child needs help with. So what that shows up for me in my pen pal program is that I can see students have been bullied in the past and they're struggling. And so when you're struggling to even have your needs met, it's really hard to learn. So another portion of the social and emotional learning and the pen pal support is you have typically in any learning space a few SEL models, so social and emotional learning models. And these are individuals who really focus more on getting their needs met and less on what they're perceived like by their peers. And so they're okay with standing up for someone else. And they're okay with saying, that's not okay. We can't make fun of this student. And so pairing SEL models with students that have been bullied has proven to be really effective in the classroom. And so we have two components to a pen pal program. We can write letters and help students relate to each other in a productive way. And then we have a second component, which is writing compassionate letters based on a topic. So it might be a student is feeling really anxious about learning because they do not feel like they have the capabilities to overcome a learning challenge. And so having peers write support letters in a few different ways can really show empathy and practice empathy and compassion within a learning space. So again, this pen pal program can be whatever you want it to be. And I have an example if you'd like to see it. But I think the useful component to it is that you can really help students relate better to others and then help students kind of practice what it means to express emotions in a vulnerable way. Next slide. So these are some examples for younger students that I use, which is, you can talk about anything in a pen pal program, and here's an opportunity to provide some art. So we can go through the next slide as well. At the bottom of the page, you'll see that there's the ELA standards, English Language Arts standards for the Common Core. So, as educators, we're often asked to do so much, and every year it seems to get more and more. So I try to make it so that I'm not creating additional work for myself, but rather incorporate this, for example, incorporate social and emotional learning into an already existing curriculum. And so within English language arts and writing, we talk about social and emotional learning through a pen pal program. So that accomplishes literacy, writing stamina, and social and emotional learning. We also incorporate art. And so I think it really does kind of help students to be more excited about the experience, the pen pal experience in writing, and then really translate that into becoming SEL models for themselves and others, which is really great. So this is just a few examples, and then the the folder that you have access to has a second presentation called, freebies, and that has all the pen pal freebies that I just talked about. So I hope you found this useful and helpful. There's, really a push by me and others for SEL champions so that we can all be SEL champions and better help meet the needs of our kiddos. So I'll open it up now for any questions you may have.
And you can put those in the chat, or you could, speak those if you would like.
Let's see if decision-making skills are very important. I find that especially with teenagers, we tend to go over that decision-making process quite a bit. Responsible decision-making and really thinking about consequences, right? Is there a training? Yes, I do right now have an online social and emotional training. It's just Introduction to Social and Emotional Learning. It does provide you with 3 star hours. So that's 3 credit hours for your professional development. So if you go to the website, you can go through the entire training and you will have access to additional resources as well. So a lot of CASEL resources and other resources that really help address social and emotional learning. Let's see, how would you modify the pen pal program for students who are not yet writing? So we're talking pre-K and kinders, for example. So let's see, let me think about that for a second. I do help my kiddos. So when I do scaffolding, my kinders get my help with writing stuff. But if you're talking about an entire classroom, you can make it a classroom exercise. So you can put up one of the slides on the screen and put a topic at hand and work through a few sentences as a class. And so you would be asking students to verbally provide positive words, and you would write them on the screen itself, and then students can practice writing new words. So when I do kinder writing, I typically will write a complete sentence and choose 1 or 2 sight words for students to write on their own whiteboard or notebook. And so what do you do with students with high anxiety level? So this is where you can provide this compassionate letter support. So a lot of my students have anxiety for different reasons in the classroom. And so by having a sign-up form that asks those questions, but then provide anonymity for those students by saying, we have a student that's experiencing X, Y, and Z. And so the first step would be having that student recognize that emotion and then how it shows up, right? And so it's showing up as a form of anxiety in the classroom. So recognize the emotion and working through it. What do you need help with? Let's set up a compassionate letter from the classroom. And so if we provide that student with anonymity and the class then provides that compassion and support, hopefully that learning environment becomes one for that student that feels safe for them to be more vulnerable in the future. So rather than anonymity, maybe in the future it becomes a student being able to communicate what concerns they may have so that they can get their needs met.
There was another question, Maria, that we might have missed. It says our county is incorporating SEL at the elementary level. Do you do anything with restorative practices?
Exactly. So that's why social and emotional learning is so great. This is a tool that can provide educators with ways to recognize and better meet the students before behavioral challenges show up. Once behavioral challenges show up, providing a space like a calming corner for a student to self-regulate and tools about recognizing emotions. So for elementary, that would be, I use these books, Feelings. I don't know if I can show it. So I use this book, it's like Feelings, and there's a few others I use as well. Spot does a few with different emotions, but I provide these tools within the calming corner. And so students that have dysregulated are given the ability to sort of self-regulate in an environment that's supportive. It should never be used as a punishment, meaning the student should want to go to that space. So it should be equipped with lots of comfy cushions, with a couch if possible. I use a fort, actually, a reading fort. So students put together and organize like a decorative plan for the fort each year, and then they use that. So they create the space so that they're actually more likely to use it. And that's restorative practice, not punishing students for losing their cool, but instead providing them with the tools they need to self-regulate and then come back to the learning space when they're ready.
So I'll read the last three questions because our time is almost coming to an end. One was, how do you suggest we embrace SEL virtually? Any tips for them?
Yeah, so my pen pal program is virtual. So you provide the letters and then we relay them by email to students. So I can share my screen so you can see what that online looks like, the online Google form looks like. And so right here, you can really have parents fill it out, or adults that are responsible for these kiddos fill it out with email address, first and last name.
Maria, we can't see that. Did you share that for them?
Oh, yes, I thought I did. Let me see. Sorry. Sorry about that. So I use Google Forms because it's online and it creates an Excel spreadsheet that makes it really easy to keep track of. Okay, so we do email address and we collect information about the parent and the student. And then at the end, you see here, to support the overall well-being of the child, would you be willing to write cards of encouragement? And if parents are willing to participate in that portion, I've seen like 97% of parents say yes to that. And then you can choose to mail letters or you can send it by email. This is where you learn more about the students' areas of strengths and areas that they need special attention. And so this creates an online way of doing that. And then what's the other question, Mia?
So you mentioned a training. They wanted to know what website is that training on? And also, are there any books that you recommend for educator book study centered on SEL, elementary and early childhood educators?
Yes. Yeah, so I should put together a book recommendation because I do provide a book recommendation to my existing families. So I should put that online on my website. But if you see on the last slide right here, this is the link to my website. And within that website, you can purchase the social and emotional learning training.
And your website is, I'll put it in the chat for everyone.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. It's theclassroomhelper.com.
Awesome. And then also the last question, which is one of the questions that I actually are very interested in as well, because I work with older students. Do you have any suggestions with buy-in for teenager/older students as they tend not to be open to emotions?
Right. So what I typically do for my older kiddos is I have them choose a book that resonates with them. And so that's likely to be something that they can see themselves in. And so within that, you provide some reflection activity. So within English language arts is a great opportunity to do this. Allowing teenagers to choose their own books that resonate with them helps open the conversation because it's relatable to them. And then within that space, we can get them to reflect on what the book has said and then what they feel that shows up like for them in, working with peers. So that can be, this person is talking about, being judged by others. And so my kiddos relate to that. And when it's relatable, the conversation naturally opens up a lot easier.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Maria. Yeah. If anyone has any additional questions for her, you can find her information on her website at theclassroomhelper.com. We also have placed those resources in the attendees folder that if you have all access through Eventbrite, you will have access to that, and also a copy of the presentation that she went through today. We appreciate Maria coming to share some wealth of knowledge with us for our babies and our older, our younger, our middle, and our older babies when we go back into the classroom or into the school buildings or just virtual learning this fall. So thank you so much, Maria. We enjoyed it. We appreciate everyone coming to this session. If you have any additional comments, you can definitely go to our Facebook page or Instagram and leave those comments for us. And also you can find information for how to contact Maria through her website. Thank you all.
Thanks, Mia. Thanks so much, everyone.
You're welcome.
Bye.
Bye.